The Black Phone is a 2022 horror film directed by Scott Derrickson and written by himself and C. Robert Guigril, a longtime collaborator. It's based on a short story by Joe Hill, Stephen King's son. It stars child actors Mason Thames and Madeleine McGraw, as well as Ethan Hawke as the antagonist. The basic premise is that Finney and his sister Gwen live with their abusive, alcoholic father in the late 1970s. The Grabber, a mysterious masked man, has been terrorizing the local community, kidnapping children who are never heard from again. First, Finney's friend disappears, and then he is snatched up by the predator. The rest of the film catalogs his attempts to escape and the effect it has on his family. While the film is horror, there's very few scares to be had, or really attempts at scares. It feels more like a coming-of-age film, or an escape room for Finney. The Grabber himself has a great mask, designed by Thomas Savini, but lacks some of the personality or presence needed to carry the film. It definitely drags in the second half, and there are some bizarre editing decisions where scenes just sort of end. There are some moments of good tension, but the overarching investigation plot is lacking, and the supernatural dreams that Gwen has ultimately come to nothing. 2.5 stars. Spoilers from here on out. It turns out that the titular Black Phone, said to be broken since the Grabber's childhood, offers a way for spirits or ghosts of the dead children to communicate with the protagonist. They offer him ways to try to get out of the cell, and while he tries all of the methods, none quite work out. In the end, though, all of the actions he took prepare him for the final confrontation with the villain, allowing him to trap the Grabber in a hole, choke him, and then snap his neck. Ultimately, it feels a bit shallow, though, like a Saturday morning cartoon. There are 3 jump scares with the dead kids in various states of bloody decay. The first is the most effective, as it comes out of nowhere. The next is a bit more graphic, but the huge build-up to it deflates the tension. The final's a decent surprise, but they all come to very little. As stated before, the original story was by Joe Hill, and there are a number of elements that feel right from a King story. There is an explicit reference with Gwen's outfit resembling Georgie's outfit from It, but there are also the kooky characters like the Grabber's brother, Max, and the useless police. There are also the vague supernatural powers that Gwen, Finney, and their mother had. It seems like the female members of the family have prophetic, or at least informational visions and dreams, while Finney apparently just has the ability to talk to dead people. Maybe. Nothing is spelled out, and they don't have any connection with the villain. All of Gwen's visions are pointing to a house, but it turns out it was the house across the street, and her brother escaped on his own anyway. It just doesn't form a cohesive whole. The parts that are effective relate directly to abuse. The hardest scene to watch is when Gwen's father lays into her with a belt because the police came to his work and asked about her. In a scene earlier, he had a terrible hangover, and both kids tiptoe around him, but now it's shown exactly how awful he can be. Later, we see a mirror of this with the Grabber, who sits and waits for his captured children to attempt to escape so that he can beat them. To him, it's a game, naughty boy, where eventually they will make a mistake and do something bad so that he can beat them and kill them, and it's morally alright. It's implied he was abused in the same way, and he's simply continuing that cycle. The confusion comes in with his brother, who is a bit odd, but otherwise seems fairly well adjusted. In the original story, he was a completely strung-out junkie, explaining both his inability to realize his brother was a serial killer, and showing the damage the upbringing did to both of them. The moments with the belt are also the most tense, as Finney has to tiptoe past the sleeping giant. This is all the more effective because of the earlier scene with the father, showing us how brutal a beating can be. Unfortunately, while the parallel is effective, the Grabber as a villain isn't. The mask design is great, and it changes over the course of the film, which is a nice touch, helping to show his emotions despite a static face. It's inspired by ceramic dolls from the late 1800s and made to look like something the Grabber found, then modified. They actually ended up making over 40 different masks for his stunt double, the different forms, and for production shots, though only about 5 variations are seen in the film. There's certainly a few creepy moments, like when Finney wakes up and finds him sitting in the room, watching him sleep, but they're few and far between. The characters describe the terrible violence he commits, but it's never actually seen. Even the kidnapping element is rather mundane, as he just sprays some gas into the kid's mouth, and that's it. The balloons, which are very prominent early on, also don't come to anything. There are just a lot of disconnected elements, but no greater meaning behind them. Though the most unbelievable element of the film is a part-time magician was able to afford 2 homes. The 70s really were a very different time. There are still good parts of the film, however. Despite the occasional odd editing, the cinematography is quite good, and all the actors play the parts well, especially the children. There is good color grading, and a fairly solid effort to make it fit with the style of the time. The scenes where they are aiming for tension, most notably the Grabber waiting in the chair, are the most effective parts of the film, and while the ending fight is predictable, it still uses all the parts well. Ultimately, the Black Phone is like a deconstructed hamburger. All the pieces are there. Some of them even look really good, though others are a bit sad by their lonesome. When it comes to actually eating it though, there's too much space between them, and the payoff is just a bit worse than if you had a normal sandwich. I hope you enjoyed this review. If you agree or disagree, please leave a comment below and let me know.